England had many rulers and many dynasties in its long and bloody history. One of the most significant rulers was the last of the Tudor dynasty, Queen Elizabeth I. She accomplished many things in her rule, lasting from 1558 to 1603. She was very intelligent, and she got a very good education. In the Elizabethan era, there were many forms of entertainment, some rather brutal. For example, bear baiting, which was tying a bear to a post and allowing large dogs to attack it, was popular at the time. This brutality was mostly removed from the drama of the time. Very important pieces were written during this era. For example, the plays and sonnets of William Shakespeare, something many people may be familiar with. As Elizabeth was an avid reader, she pursued this drama and literature. Queen Elizabeth's exploration of drama and literature led to the Elizabethan era being a high point for writing, and to William Shakespeare and other authors being able to write their famous works. Queen Elizabeth enjoyed reading. Not many women read, or were even able to read at the time, but since Elizabeth was royalty, she was taught how to read. Once she showed her appreciation for a book that had been in Latin, Consolation of Philosophy, by translating it into English in under 24 hours, making it more accessible for people who did not read Latin. In this way, she helped the writers of the time. She read their books. She also influenced the drama companies of the Elizabethan era, in both negative and positive ways. While there are many acting companies in 1550, in 1572 she banned all companies that weren't bound to a patron, a nobleman who was responsible for them. Thus, many theater companies broke up. However, most of the ones that could not find anyone to sponsor them were troublemakers, making it a cleaner and more professional business. Then, in 1758, Elizabeth licensed only 6 theater companies, trying to keep it under control. This made acting a competitive business. This may sound like it was a bad thing, but it made the actors work harder to get better, and it made the writers work to make their plays more popular to the general public. Thus, in this way, the reducing of the theater companies actually helped them expand and improve, and Elizabeth had a huge influence on it. She also helped foster Shakespeare's plays, and he was close with the royal court. She acted in 2 companies in front of the Queen, and the Queen was very encouraging towards him and his ventures. During her reign, Queen Elizabeth was an inspiration for performers and writers. One of her notable influences is on Edmund Spenser's The Faerie Queene, an allegorical struggle between good and evil in British history. The first 3 were dedicated to Queen Elizabeth herself. The story represents the political issues within England at the time, of which there were many. It especially represents the struggles of the Protestant Church, which was established under Elizabeth's father Henry VIII's rule, but banned under her sister Mary's rule. This is considered one of the most important poems in the history of English literature, and it had been written under Elizabeth's rule. Another thing that Elizabeth inspired was drama. She enjoyed Shakespeare's plays and sonnets. At one point, Shakespeare wrote an extremely complimentary poem about her. He also added a sincere eulogy to her at the end of King Henry VIII. She might have also inspired A Midsummer Night's Dream. Also during the Tudor dynasty, there was an interesting trend that when Queen Elizabeth traveled, the people who greeted her dressed up as various creatures and made up stories. They claimed they predicted her arrival and often made her into the protagonist of a story where she had to do a simple task in order to help the people. As the Queen traveled quite a lot, many of these shows were put on. This was a form of drama in this era and involved acting. All the shows were inspired by and put on because of Elizabeth I. Elizabeth was not only a reader, but like many readers, she was a writer as well. During her time, oration, or speeches, was a very important genre. Elizabeth was a master of them. Her speeches were especially thoughtful. Her last speech, her Golden Speech, was one of her most influential speeches. It was also one of her last. She spoke about her rule and how she was getting older. It helped calm down a public that was getting antsy due to her declining abilities, caused by her age. She also skillfully wrote letters. She learned to subtly imply ideas in her letters, to say things without really saying them. She was also a poet and composed quite a few sonnets. She was quite skilled in her work. She projected herself in her writing with many layers of personality, and her speeches and other writings helped her popularity and power stay constantly high. In fact, her writing style is quite similar to Shakespeare, similar enough that, when put through a computer program to identify if another author really wrote Shakespeare's sonnets by comparing keywords, she came out having the closest writing style to him. She is a skilled, but not very well-known writer of the Elizabethan era. Many of the writings of the Elizabethan era now affect our everyday life and the way we write now. During this era, a very famous writer wrote all of his dramas, William Shakespeare. Even now, we are learning about all of his plays. Romeo and Juliet is one of the most well-known plays ever. If you mention Romeo and Juliet in conversation, nearly everyone will understand what you mean. A Midsummer Night's Dream was inspired by Queen Elizabeth, and many people know of it. As mentioned previously, during the Elizabethan era, Edmund Spenser wrote The Faerie Queene. It was a very important piece of literature. It helped us understand the history and politics of during that time and the conflict experienced by the people. Poetically, it was also very influential, and it resulted in Spenser being referred to as the Prince of Poetry, which is not a title given to just anyone. Elizabeth's strong speeches also were very influential and affected the way speeches were written in the Elizabethan era's effect on literature and drama of the future was definitely a great one. Historians call the Elizabethan era the golden age of literature and drama, and they are correct. During the Elizabethan era, many important things were written, such as The Faerie Queene and Shakespeare's plays. Queen Elizabeth herself was an inspiration for many of these plays, and influenced drama and literature by consuming this sort of entertainment and creating laws to govern theater companies. Elizabeth also wrote her own works in her own excellent writing style. The literature and drama in the Elizabethan era was very important, and it was greatly influenced by Queen Elizabeth I.